And welcome back to Frankly Speaking. Joining me tonight is my good friend Neil of the Servants of the Sacred Fire. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty good.
Well, great for you to join me. For my audience here who hasn't seen me in a couple of months, I've been dealing with some health issues, and this is really the first show I've done. It's in many ways a test show here to see how long I can last because I got these extreme migraines I've been dealing with. And so I called up Neil. I said, let's fire it up here. Neil's got, if you remember, Neil, he was with me over at the Knights of Christendom, and we now have both launched our own podcast here, and you can find Neil's podcast very soon as he'll be getting it up. Once again, it's called The Servants of the Sacred Fire. And I said, Neil, I was cruising the internet the other day, and our good friend Glenn Beck always comes across my YouTube feed here, right?
Yeah.
And, listen, I don't dislike Mr. Beck. I just think I'm just not too high on his sort of political outlooks. I'll be nice about it, right?
His Americanism.
And he recently came out, no, not recently, about 2 months ago, after the Roe v. Wade decision came out. There's this thing in our political establishment or culture lately, especially from the right, Neil, that somehow they believe that an impending civil war is coming to America because we've become so divided in this country politically, right? And I think now the current administration in power, using, let's put it this way, a forceful hand in implementing their policies, the right has become very dispirited. Now, as a guy who's not either on the right or left, I'm more of an integralist thinker. I have my problems with both sides of the aisle. And so here, once again, come the conservatives, and they're talking about this impending civil war, something that I want no part of. But that's the talking point on the right. And, it's a concern that's so real that Glenn Beck has recently come up with a compromise to help the country avoid this supposed civil war that he claims is coming. And this is his compromise, right? It comes from about 2 months ago, about a month or two after Roe v. Wade was decided and ultimately defeated and overturned by the Supreme Court. And what Beck says is, okay, listen, we want to avoid the civil war here. Maybe we could come up with a compromise deal. If we give the left abortion with some restrictions, kind of something akin to how our founding fathers dealt with slavery during the Civil War, as long as they give us free speech and our gun rights, we'll give them abortion. Neil, what are your thoughts on that?
I think well, first off, I believe in the clip he tries to say that they were trying to avert the Civil War through this compromise. And it was, having to do with, well, you can't have any more slaves. You can keep the ones you got, but you can't have any more, that kind of thing. Well, first off, it doesn't work even historically because we do have a civil war. So it doesn't even avert that. So it doesn't even accomplish what he's hoping to accomplish there. But it's a ridiculous compromise, especially even more so in the area of abortion, because he's saying, well, we'll keep the Bill of Rights. You give us the Bill of Rights, especially the first two amendments, and we'll give you abortion. So in other words, all the unborn children don't get the civil rights, don't get the Bill of Rights. They don't get that. Just those of us who've already walking around get to have that. All right. I mean, not only is that ridiculous on its face, would we apply that to anything else? Would we say, okay, Nazi Germany, listen, you can't build any more concentration camps, but you can keep the ones you got. You can keep slaughtering them Jews. All right. Because just give us the Bill of Rights, not the Jews. They don't get the Bill of Rights. They can kill them, but we get to keep it. And you just can't build any more, but you can keep slaughtering them. And that'll go into effect within 10 years. And all of Germany has to go along with this. You wouldn't apply it to that. You would not have this ridiculous standard. And I think this has at the core of this is that even Glenn Beck does not see that unborn child as a child because he's not applying those basic human rights to that human being. He's skipping over them. He's making an exception. And like I said, also, it's not going to give the result you're looking for either. It's not going to stop it. The slavery had to come to an end through a civil war. Guns had to be used to bring it finally to an end. Okay. They were not winning over hearts and minds. Okay. They were enforcing it. All right. Um, I do not look forward to a civil war. Um, but I mean, if something like that had to happen, I'm not going to and my point is I'm not going to compromise for genocide. I'm not going to say it's okay to genocide people to avoid a war. Is what I'm trying to get across. Um, and like with my Nazi illustration analogy, you would have even more motivation to do it with the Nazis because that was a world war, not a civil war,
Right.
and that was even more destructive. I mean, so I feel like we're having a double standard here, and at the core of it, he doesn't see them as human beings.
Yeah, and that's brilliantly put. I love that analogy there too. This ultimate compromise, and I think the problem here's the problem that I have. Right? I mean, you point out the most obvious, the most glaring problem here. Many of us joined the conservative movement because of the pro-life issue. That was my first kind of venture into the sort of the political curiosities of my age back in the early 90s. I was a young Catholic apologist at the time, or practicing Catholic apologetics. And my curiosity in politics started because of the abortion issue, because I saw it as an intrinsic moral evil. And many of us have been fighting for a long time. And there's even, people out there that have done a lot more than I have. And here we are, we've been fighting this battle since 71, right? Let's call it roughly 50 years. Neil, there's people that have marched and prayed decades upon decades of rosaries. They've been arrested. They've been shoved. They've pushed around. They've been spit on. They've lost their livelihoods, their jobs. I mean, so many great sacrifices that have been made over that 50-year period in order to finally have something good and decent happen within the realm of the culture in America. And as soon as we get it, Glenn Beck wants to surrender it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just astounded by that, Neil. It's quite remarkable that he's willing to surrender it. And again, it goes back to what I said and why I'm no longer a conservative, why I'm no longer of right. I've been out of that camp now for a decade, and it's precisely because of the likes of Mr. Beck and these compromises that they're not willing ever to stand up for truth at the end of the day, because religion, classical liberal religion, and the thumping of the Constitution always compromises truth and morality. And this goes back to when I was in the classical liberal camp. There was always this conundrum where when we begin to sort of thump the Constitution, for some reason, we're always asked to make these moral compromises in order to save the Constitution of the United States, Neil. And this is not the first time. This is just a great example of Mr. Beck now making this ultimate compromise, even suggesting this at this point. But I will say this, Neil, we've had nothing good happen in my lifetime alone, at least on a social front in America. I'm going to be 51 at the end of this month. And all I've seen throughout my whole life is America go to the far left, culturally and morally. I've seen in my lifetime the absolute eradication of culture and family. There's been virtually nothing for us to celebrate in America in my lifetime. And now that we've got the victory, something finally good. I can say in America, something good finally happened, because we are notorious at this point as Americans pushing all the moral degradations of the world, right? Legislating them, funding them, shipping them overseas,
Endorsing them.
Right. And all of a sudden we get our first victory, major victory in my lifetime in the midst of the social culture. And Mr. Beck, within a month or two, wants to surrender it. I'm astounded by his stupidity, actually, Neil.
Yeah. I mean, he says that, well, I'm not sure if I would even take this deal. Then why are we discussing it? Why are you even suggesting it? Yeah. If you had a clear understanding of the value of human life and the unborn, you wouldn't even bring it up, especially when it's just been overturned. So there's no point in even bringing up such a ludicrous idea to consider. It's so stupid. It's so off base. And I mean, you're right. We haven't had a lot of success as far as morality and socially whatnot. I mean, it's always going. What they say, I heard someone say, the Democrats or the left is going to the left speeding, and the right is going to the left at the speed limit. It's like they're just going a little slower, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like it's constantly going in the wrong direction, and we're constantly making compromises. That's why you have the plus people and the transgender people in the classrooms, because we made compromises with them.
Yeah.
We compromised and said, you do your own thing, right? Just don't come over to my side of the property line. You can live your life however you want. We won't have any laws saying that it's illegal to engage in those kind of acts. We'll legalize it. Well, that's not good enough anymore. Now we need to come tell your children about it. Now we need to have strip clubs with your kids about it. You don't compromise with evil. Every time you compromise with it, they're going to take more ground because they're not going to compromise. They're coming in for all of it. They want all of it. They don't want a compromise.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up a great point. Let's talk about this compromise for a second, because who are you going to compromise with at this point? A bunch of communists. A bunch of communists. That's who you're going to compromise with now. And let me ask you a question. When's the last time the right compromised with a bunch of communists and they actually didn't lose or got something out of it?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to sit down at the table of power with a bunch of communists. Now, I know Glenn Beck believes, and I've heard him say this, that communists deserve a seat at the table of power, which is something that I'm like, okay. But
why?
Well, again, I mean, what we've known from the far left is they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal in order to get what they want. If you cut this compromise with them, what is their record of, honoring what they've agreed to? They never have.
Yeah. You don't compromise. You don't give the guy who's trying to kill you a seat at your dinner table.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and say, listen, we're going to just talk this out. No, he wants to kill you. He wants to destroy everything you believe in. Okay? He wants your family dead. He wants your house burned, and you're inviting him over for a casserole. That's not going to work.
Exactly. And when I was on the political right, this is all we did, right? This is what we used to call in the Republican Party, the conservative camp, the big tent approach, because we got to get to 50+1 in order to win the next election, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to invite the libertarians and those that don't believe in God and the disordered, and we got to invite, the moderates. And what happens when you simply invite all these different flavors and brands and ideas? You water down the product itself. And that's what we've seen in the Republican Party. I mean, it's just, and then values are sacrificed ultimately at that point. And two, I think, listen, I mean, he wants his free speech and he wants his guns. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, you give them abortion. You think the left is still not going to come for those?
Yeah.
You think they're not going to come for those? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what the compromise would be is legislatively, we have to sign off on surrendering on abortion. But how do we deal with what we're getting back? It's just going to be a promissory note, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't legislate a lot of those things away. And so you think they're going to stop going after guns? No, of course not. You think they're going to silence us? Because the moment the left surrenders on actually silencing people is the moment they lose, and they know this. They need to silence people, right? This is why we have all these issues with the big, with the big companies that are silencing certain voices. They don't need that other opinion. They're not going to make a compromise that actually undercuts the very goal that they're trying to accomplish here. They will cut it in such a way, and Republicans are notorious for making bad deals with the Democratic Party. They will cut a deal that simply puts them in the position to where we lose what we want and cherish. And all it does is takes them a few more extra years ultimately to get what they want. So by the end of it all, and this is what history dictates in America, is abortion will be legal all over the place, and then we'll still lose our guns and our free speech. That's what it would be.
Yeah, they're going to do everything they can by hook or by crook to get what they want, because they actually believe in what they say. They believe they're right. They believe their power grab is correct. They believe their principles should dominate. And our problem is that we don't really believe in ourselves. We don't believe in our own principles, because if we did, we wouldn't be putting up with these people. We would have an integralist society where our laws reflect our moral principles. Okay, where our moral conscience, our Catholic morality, is influencing the laws of the nation, and these types of people are not legalized. Okay, where it's not promoted, where it's not allowed, because if they get into power, they're not going to allow us. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
They're going to do the same. And I don't blame them necessarily for doing that, because if you believe it, then you should live that out. They're wrong. They're on the side of evil. But if you believe it, you should be living it out. That's how you live congruently with yourself. Otherwise, you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. That's why what I've said before with I've had family members that have gone over to the bat for the other team, and there was concern as to how they would talk to their other siblings, on these issues. And the point I made to them is they're going to evangelize their sisters. They're going to evangelize them. Why? Because they believe what they're doing is right and it's normal. So why wouldn't they tell them it's right and it's normal? Why would they pretend it's not and not try to evangelize? Everybody, if you believe in your own ideology, you're going to evangelize because you believe that's the best way to be. That's the best way to act. It's correct. All right. The only people I find who don't live up to that are the people like Glenn Beck who talk out of both sides of their mouth.
Yeah. And see, this is the problem I have. At some point, I don't want to judge anybody's heart. I really don't, Neil. But at some point, how can I put this without? He's got to know his heart of hearts that these deals can't be cut with the left. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
We have too much evidence throughout history over the past 30, 40 years that the left is not interested in cutting deals. Only when they know they win the deal and they get what they want and the right loses. That's the only deal the left ever cuts. It's hard for me to believe that Glenn Beck doesn't see this or hasn't experienced it and doesn't look back and say, okay, every time we try to compromise, we've gotten screwed. So the question is, in my mind, what's Beck's motivation here? And I think the more I listen to him, the more I believe that Beck is out of answers. The conservative movement is out of answers, right? Because at some point, when you've been on the air for 30 years like he has, and you've been pounding the table, it's the Marxists, it's the Marxists, it's the Marxists. And then after 30 years, like Mr. Beck has done, whoa, no, it wasn't Marxist. It wasn't communist. It was fascist.
It's a fascist now.
Right, yeah. We're just changing words and throwing words without meaning out there, of course, right? Mm-hmm. But I think he's struggling as the country devolves further and further to the left to give his audience answers, because Americans are starting to feel the pressure now that something has gone wrong in this country. And many people, like when I used to listen to Limbaugh back in the day, we used to turn him on in the morning because he was Mr. Hope, right? He gave us hope. Yeah. He was gonna spin it for us and tell us, okay, this isn't so bad. This is how you need to look at it. It's actually good, not bad. Well, here we are now. The right continues to lose. Their people see this. Hope is being lost. And I'm in the Midwest. I'm telling you right now, people are losing hope. People are losing hope in this country right now. And these guys got to give some kind of an answer. And you could only repeat the election stuff so many times. Oh, we're going to win this election, and we're going to win this Senate race, and we're going to take back the House, because nothing ever happens at the end of the day, even when Republicans have been empowered. At some point, after 30 years, 35 years on the airwaves, your people are going to start to figure out, wait a minute, I need a real answer here. None of this makes sense anymore.
Yeah, and that's why it's like when I'm talking to people and they say, well, you're a Republican. I'm like, maybe I'm registered Republican, but that's about as deep as it goes.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, because the Republicans go left just like the left does. They might do it slower, but that's what they do.
Yeah, I changed my registration a few years back. I know my Republican friends said, well, you can't vote in the primaries. I don't give two craps anymore. I mean, especially because I'm in such a...
Well, apparently it doesn't do anything to vote.
Yeah, well, see, that's the point, right?
I
no.
mean,
Well, my
according to
point is
some, it got
that,
stolen. So what's it matter?
yeah, exactly. Okay, but just on a basic sort of philosophical
Yeah.
principle, the Republican Party doesn't deserve my vote. They got to earn it.
Yeah.
That's just the way I feel about it now.
Mhm.
And so I mean, but that's where we're at this point. I think Mr. Beck. Listen, I know we pick a lot on him here on this show. A
Mhm.
lot of it's because it's very easy. I think
Yeah, but he does make himself an easy target.
he's a very easy target. I just don't think. I don't think he's the sharpest tool in the shed, and I don't mean that to be mean or to slander the man, but a public figure like that, that's made so many blunders over the years and influenced so many people, I think at some point you have to call this out. Just like we here can get called out at any time for our blunders, right? I
Mhm.
just think there's a record out there with a lot of these guys on talk radio, and not just the right, but also the left, where they never get called out on anything. It's just a narrative to keep, I think in this case, conservative Inc., right? The conservative business model working here, right? Buy my Patriot water, buy my Patriot
Yeah.
and for $39.95, you could buy my covenant with God that I'm going to send to you, as Mr. Beck has
I
done,
remember that.
right?
I remember that.
It's a business. It's a business at the end of the day. So,
I
Neil,
don't
my
know if
friend,
that's a
final thoughts.
I don't know if that's just a Glenn Beck thing, or is that like a Mormon idea that you can just make up covenants.
Yeah,
So I don't know where it comes from. Anyway, so yeah, I think his whole idea of even entertaining this so-called compromise is ridiculous. I don't think he's thought it through at all. He hasn't applied it to other things, and thought that doesn't make sense. He, I wonder how much of this is just entertaining the audience, like getting a rise out of the audience.
yeah. Mhm.
That's kind of, I want to be controversial, so I'll say this thing. Um, because I got to give him that. He knows how to entertain. He-
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
making. He's got a business model that's working. Um, but I don't. I'm not so sure, or I can't decide whether he doesn't have any idea of a solution, or if it's he doesn't want a solution. He just wants to keep it spinning because that's the business.
Yeah,
That keeps everybody employed. You know.
yeah. I think
But
that's to the yeah.
yeah, so I don't know how I feel about Glenn Beck nowadays. I mean, I listen to him on my phone constantly when I'm working or something. Um, and I can't tell you why. I do, but I don't really know why because I
Me
know I'm
too.
going to hate something he says.
Well, I think we've done so much with him over the years, especially me and you, that he just comes up on my feed constantly. The guys I'm
Mhm.
generally getting on the right, because I stepped away from a lot of the right wing talkers. The guys that I generally get are Beck, D'Souza, and Tucker. And
Mhm.
while Tucker isn't perfect, right, in sort of because I'm an integralist and he's more of a classical liberal, Tucker's the one guy I respect because he really challenges the status quo on both the left and the right. D'Souza, I'm okay with it. Beck, I'm not a big fan of his. I think there's a lot of
Yeah,
problems. Yeah,
he's got this obsession with the founding fathers, and
yeah,
it's like well, they're not perfect, but they're damn near close. I mean, it's the way I'm sure he thinks of it because it's like he never has a disparaging thing to say about the founding fathers or the founding documents, and yet he still wants to hold on to this whole, well, it's a Christian nation thing. Well, yeah, okay, fine, it's a Protestant nation at best, all right,
yeah,
and only because the people themselves are Protestant, not that the nation itself was founded on it.
yeah, for sure.
Um, but he tries to, what's the word? Divinize or bless the nation, like Christianize it, I should say. He's trying to Christianize it to
Yeah,
say this is this holy God's providence and this kind of thing. And it's like, okay, you're going too far with it back. I mean, come
yeah.
on.
I mean, we can love our country. Don't get me wrong. It's our
Hmm.
home, and and all that stuff. And even the church tells us that we need to love our country, defend it, and all that stuff. But I think there's a big difference between loving your country and then when you have certain, let's put it this way, uh, postmodern uh, political principles of liberalism that really they're problematic. Let's put it that way. And that's what he's asking us to
Hmm.
embrace. I'll embrace the country, but I can't embrace the liberal principles that ultimately give us all these problems that we have currently. And the issue is with Mr. Beck is he can never relate between, again, those philosophical principles and the problems that we have today. There's always an excuse, primarily that being the left wing. And as I keep arguing, the left is a simple natural fruition of what were the classical liberals at one time. And so we've never taken seriously a lot of the problems of license and a lot of the problems of creating a society without any moral arbiter of truth, starting with the church, right? I mean, it's like, for example, lots of classical liberals will tout this wonderful idea of limited government, right? And how we have to strive for limited government. The smaller government is, the better we're all off, the less corruption in government. Fine, I get that. But do they ever acknowledge that the issue of limited government is actually what's called subsidiarity in the old world? Yeah. And it was a Catholic idea that actually worked. The irony here is, Neil, that limited government or subsidiarity has never worked in America from day one. And the primary reason why it's never worked here is because the founding fathers separated the moral law, mainly the church, from the idea of subsidiarity. That's the problem there. The church understood that morality and governance has to go hand in hand. They're not separate here. And like you said, okay, at best we're a Protestant nation. And actually what we are actually is secular. The spillover of the Protestant Reformation. It spilled over into the New World, and that chaotic mess started by the Reformers and all the doctrinal anarchy is what's played out in America for 250 years. And you wonder why we're at each other's throats, why we have no common values, no common culture, and our politics is corrupt. It's right there, Neil. It's right there. It's played out throughout history, but Mr. Beck doesn't see it that way. So,
Yeah, and I think it was John Locke who wanted the plurality of religions.
Yeah.
So that they would be more easily controlled because they're fighting amongst themselves.
Well,
as opposed to having a unified belief system for a country.
Yeah. Charles Colomb talked about this, how the difference between Protestant nations and Catholic nations are that Protestant nations are conformist nations, while Catholic nations are more a pain in the butt. Because Catholics, we have one idea of what truth is, and that's what we're always striving for. And until we get that one ideal, we're a pain in the butt in any civilization that we kind of live in. But the Protestants, because of all these sectarian divisions, they always have to take the political big tent approach to everything, including morality. And so Protestant nations tend to conform to this idea I call, well, let's just accept the top 10 points of the faith and not haggle over the little moral issues, right? But as we've seen, those little moral issues, starting with, like, for example, contraception, they turn into big issues later on, right?
Yeah. Because they're not little to begin with. I mean, they're
not little, no.
They're little in your mind.
Yeah, right.
You don't consider it to be part of the top 10 of the faith, but then that's a problem to begin with the Reformation.
Yeah, and so Protestant nations become nations that compromise everything in politics and culture and morality. Catholic nations, on the other hand, they're a pain in the butt. That's why Catholic nations have had to be exterminated via revolution or world wars, and why they've been attacked constantly from classical liberals and communists throughout its history, because we're like, well, wait a minute, you can't change eternal truth. This is what we have. The church is in place, and we don't water down our morality, right? There's a clear right and wrong. Where in Protestantism, through this idea of personal Jesus or sola scriptura or individual private codes, everybody can water down their own morality. And so it's just kind of like, okay, well, you go in your basement and believe what you want, and I'll go in my basement and believe what I want. And that's what we've done in America. It's personal moral codes. And now we don't got a culture anymore. We don't got any common morals anymore. And you wonder why we have all the problems that we have, Mr. Beck.
It seems like they want the Catholic ending of universal truth, right? Of universal morals, but they want to do it through a Protestant relativism. It doesn't work that way.
That's remarkable. So there you go. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So Mr. Beck, a month or two after we finally won this great battle to overturn Roe v. Wade, all the blood, tears, sacrifices that people made to bring this to an end. Mr. Beck wants to compromise it away now, in order to get his, I don't know, gun rights, free speech, or whatever he thinks is more important than that at this point in time. And Lord knows I see what the left is doing, encroaching in many ways. But you don't compromise with evil to get to truth. You don't, Neil.
Mhm.
So, there you have it, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen. Neil, my friend. Let's see here. Servants of the Sacred Fire. That's your new vlog, right?
Yeah, I stole it from in part from Lord of the Rings.
Okay,
It's
that's good.
and the Lord of the Rings, it's Servants of the Secret Fire. I just changed it to Sacred.
There you go. There you go. When do you project your site's going to be up?
Probably by the end of the month, I'm guessing, because
Okay,
like I said, I was talking to you earlier, was I want to get videos recorded
gotcha.
on my computer, and so I can just start uploading, you know, regularly, instead of having to feel like I gotta hurry get one out because
I
that kind
gotcha.
of thing.
All right. All right. Sounds good, my friend. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll see how my health issues go. I'd like to start podcasting again regularly here. And I want to thank you for joining us again. This is Frank. I want to thank my friend Neil again for joining me tonight. Good night, everybody.